Have you ever felt like your life is a cluttered room where you can't find what you truly need? Where every day feels like you're drowning in chaos, searching for meaning, but finding only noise? What if I told you that a 67-year-old retired surgeon in a Boston hospital room held the key to transforming not just your workspace, but your entire existence? What if 5 simple Japanese principles could take you from overwhelmed to empowered in ways you never imagined? Stay with me, because what you're about to discover changed one woman's life completely, and it might just change yours too. It was 11:47 p.m. on a frigid Tuesday night in February. Boston General Hospital's emergency room hummed with its usual controlled chaos. The fluorescent lights cast their sterile glow over everything, making the world feel both urgent and timeless at once. Machines beeped rhythmically, footsteps echoed down linoleum hallways, and somewhere in the distance, a monitor alarm pierced through the ambient noise. Sarah Mitchell stood at the nurse's station, her 3rd consecutive night shift weighing heavily on her shoulders. At 28 years old, she'd been an ER nurse for almost 4 years now, and the exhaustion was starting to show. Not just in the dark circles under her green eyes or the way her auburn hair had started escaping from its messy bun, but in something deeper, something she couldn't quite name. Her scrubs were wrinkled from a 12-hour shift that had somehow stretched into 14. A cold coffee cup sat forgotten next to a stack of patient charts that needed updating. Her phone buzzed with texts she didn't have the energy to answer, and in her chest there was this growing weight, a heaviness that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. Sarah had always loved nursing. Ever since she was a little girl growing up in Portland, Oregon, watching her grandmother recover from heart surgery, she'd known this was her calling, helping people, being there in their darkest moments, making a difference. But somewhere along the way, that calling had started to feel like just a job. The magic had faded. The connection she once felt with patients had become mechanical. Take vitals, administer medication, update charts, move to the next room, repeat. It was like she'd become a robot going through the motions, and the worst part, she didn't even know when it had happened. "Sarah, bed 7 needs vitals check," her colleague Jennifer called out, barely looking up from her own mountain of paperwork. Sarah nodded, grabbing her stethoscope from the counter where it lay tangled with someone else's. Even her equipment felt chaotic. Nothing had its place anymore. She walked down the corridor, her sneakers squeaking against the polished floor, passing rooms filled with stories she no longer had time to hear. Bed 7, room 714. The patient was Dr. Marcus Webb. According to his chart, he was 67 years old, a retired cardiothoracic surgeon who'd ironically ended up needing the very procedure he'd performed hundreds of times on others. A triple bypass. He was 3 days post-op, stable, but needing careful monitoring. Sarah pushed open the door quietly. The room was dimmed, just a small reading light on. Dr. Webb was awake, propped up slightly, staring at the ceiling with that particular look people get when they're thinking deeply about something, or maybe everything. "Good evening, Dr. Webb," Sarah said, her voice falling into that professional, friendly tone she'd perfected over the years. "Just need to check your vitals." He turned his head slowly toward her, and she noticed something in his eyes. Not the fear or pain she usually saw in post-surgery patients. Something else. Clarity, maybe, or wisdom, the kind that comes from having stood on both sides of the hospital bed. "You can call me Marcus," he said softly. His voice had a gentle rasp to it. "The doctor part feels a bit ironic, when you're the one in the hospital gown, don't you think?" Sarah smiled slightly as she wrapped the blood pressure cuff around his arm. "How are you feeling tonight, Marcus?" "Physically? Not terrible, all things considered." He paused as she inflated the cuff. "But I imagine that's not really what you're asking, is it?" She glanced at him, surprised. Most patients just gave the standard fine or complained about pain. "Well, I meant physically, but how are you feeling otherwise?" The monitor beeped. 128/82. "Good." She jotted it down. Marcus watched her for a moment. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "What's your name? Your real name, not just what's on that badge." "Sarah. Sarah Mitchell." "Sarah," he repeated, like he was tasting the name. "How long have you been a nurse, Sarah?" "Almost 4 years." "Do you still love it?" The question caught her completely off guard. She stood there with a stethoscope in her hand, frozen for a second. How do you answer that? Especially when you're not sure yourself anymore. She started, then stopped. Something about his gaze made her feel like lying would be pointless. "I used to. I do. It's just complicated right now." Marcus nodded slowly, like she'd just confirmed something he already knew. "Everything worthwhile eventually gets complicated. The question is what we do with that complexity." Sarah finished checking his vitals in silence, marking everything down on her chart. But his question lingered in the air between them like smoke. "Do you still love it?" As she turned to leave, Marcus spoke again. "Sarah, thank you for being honest. Most people just say they're fine and move on." She looked back at him. "You're welcome. Try to get some rest, okay?" That night, as Sarah drove home through Boston's empty streets, Marcus's question played on repeat in her mind. Her apartment in Cambridge was a 15-minute drive, but tonight it felt longer. The city lights blurred past her window, and she felt that familiar tightness in her chest, the one that had become her constant companion lately. When she finally unlocked her apartment door at 1:30 a.m., she stood in the doorway and just looked at the space, really looked at it. It was chaos, not dirty exactly, but cluttered in a way that made her feel immediately exhausted. Her scrubs from the last 3 days were draped over the couch. The coffee table was covered with medical journals she'd meant to read, empty takeout containers, unopened mail, and her laptop surrounded by a nest of charging cables. The kitchen counter had dishes in the sink, a half-empty wine bottle from 2 weeks ago, and vitamins she'd forgotten to take. Her bedroom was worse. Clothes everywhere, some clean, some dirty, all mixed together in piles on the chair, the floor, the bed. Her nightstand was crowded with water bottles, books she'd started but never finished, and random receipts. Sarah dropped her bag by the door and sank onto the couch, pushing aside a pile of laundry to make room. She pulled out her phone. 17 unread messages, most from her mother, a few from friends she'd been meaning to catch up with, one from her ex-boyfriend from 3 months ago that she still hadn't deleted. Everything felt heavy, not the stuff itself, but the weight of it all, the unfinished tasks, the unread messages, the unworn clothes, the undone life. She thought about Marcus's question again. Do you still love it? The truth was, she didn't know if she loved nursing anymore because She didn't know if she loved anything anymore. Everything had become this overwhelming blur of obligations, stuff, and exhaustion. When was the last time she'd felt truly excited about something? Truly clear-headed? Truly present? Sarah looked around her apartment again. This small space that was supposed to be her sanctuary had become just another source of stress. Just like her job. Just like her relationships. Just like everything else. She didn't know it yet, but sitting there at 1:45 a.m., surrounded by the physical manifestation of her internal chaos, Sarah Mitchell was on the edge of a transformation, one that would start in the most unexpected place, a hospital room with a retired surgeon and a concept from Japan that would reorganize not just her space, but her entire life. The next night, Sarah returned to her shift feeling exactly as exhausted as when she'd left. She'd managed maybe 4 hours of restless sleep, spent an hour staring at her cluttered apartment, trying to motivate herself to clean it, and given up. Instead, she'd scrolled through social media, comparing her messy life to everyone else's highlight reels, which only made her feel worse. Now, back in the ER, she moved through her rounds mechanically, room after room, patient after patient, until she reached 714 again. Marcus was sitting up this time, looking noticeably better. His color had improved, and there was an alertness in his eyes that hadn't been there the night before. "Good evening, Sarah," he said as she entered, and she was struck by how he remembered her name. Most patients didn't. "Hi, Marcus. You're looking better." "Feeling better, too. The human body is remarkable, isn't it? Give it the right conditions, and it knows exactly how to heal itself." He paused, though I suspect the same could be said about the human spirit. Sarah began her routine checks, but she felt his eyes on her, not in an uncomfortable way, but observant, like he was seeing something she wasn't showing. "You look tired," he said gently. She laughed, but it came out more bitter than she'd intended. Occupational hazard. "Is it just the job, though?" Sarah's hands paused on the blood pressure monitor. Why did this man keep asking questions that cut right through her defenses? "What do you mean?" Marcus shifted slightly, wincing just a bit. "I spent 42 years as a surgeon, Sarah. I've seen thousands of healthcare workers come through those doors, and I learned to recognize a particular kind of exhaustion. It's not physical tiredness, it's spiritual clutter." Spiritual clutter? She'd never heard that phrase before. When everything in your life becomes noise, when you're carrying so much that you can't hear what really matters anymore, when the weight isn't just on your body, but on your soul. Sarah stood very still. It was like he'd reached inside her chest and named the exact feeling she'd been unable to articulate for months. "How did you—" she started, then stopped. Marcus smiled gently. "Because I lived it. For years, I was drowning in that same clutter, physically, mentally, emotionally. My office was chaos. My mind was chaos. My relationships were chaos. I was performing life-saving surgeries while my own life was falling apart." He gestured around the sparse hospital room. "It took ending up here as a patient instead of a doctor to finally understand what I'd been doing wrong." Sarah found herself pulling up the chair next to his bed without thinking about it. Something in his voice made her want to listen. Really listen. "What were you doing wrong?" she asked quietly. "I was keeping everything, every obligation, every relationship, every possession, every thought, every emotion. I convinced myself it was all important, all necessary. But the truth was, I couldn't tell the difference anymore between what mattered and what was just clutter. The monitor beeped softly. Sarah realized she'd forgotten to finish taking his vitals, but for once, she didn't care about the protocol. This felt more important. "So what changed?" she asked. Marcus looked at her thoughtfully. "Have you ever heard of the Japanese concept of Seiri?" She shook her head. Seiri means sort or separate. It's the first principle in a philosophy called the 5S methodology, originally developed for manufacturing, but I discovered it applies to life just as powerfully. He paused, watching her reaction. Seiri is about making a fundamental distinction. What do you truly need and what is just taking up space? Like decluttering? It starts there, yes. But it goes so much deeper. It's not just about your physical environment, though that's where most people begin. It's about your mental space, your emotional commitments, your relationships, your habits, your beliefs about yourself. He leaned forward slightly, and his voice dropped to something almost conspiratorial. "Sarah, imagine your life is like this hospital room. What if everything you're carrying right now, every possession, every worry, every obligation, every relationship was laid out in front of you? How much of it would you actually choose to keep?" The question hit her like a physical force. She thought about her apartment, the clothes she never wore but couldn't throw away, the friendship she maintained out of guilt rather than joy, the career path she'd chosen but now questioned, the constant mental noise of things she should be doing, should want, should become. How much of it would she actually choose? "I don't know," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus nodded. "Most people don't, because we've never given ourselves permission to ask that question. We just keep accumulating stuff, commitments, expectations, until we're so buried we can't see clearly anymore." Sarah felt something crack open inside her chest. Not breaking, exactly, but opening, like a window she didn't know was there. "How do you start?" she asked. "How do you figure out what to keep?" "You begin with awareness," Marcus said. "Just observation. Look at your life. Really look at it. And start naming what's there. Not judging it yet, not trying to fix it, just seeing it clearly." He settled back against his pillows. "Think of it like triage, which you do every day in this ER. When multiple patients come in, you assess who needs immediate attention and who can wait. Seiri is triage for your life. What needs your energy right now? What's critical? What's important? And what's just noise?" The comparison clicked for Sarah immediately. She was excellent at triage. In the ER, she could instantly prioritize, categorize, decide. But in her own life, she'd been treating everything like a critical emergency, spreading herself so thin that nothing got the attention it actually deserved. "I never thought about it that way," she said. "Most people don't. We're taught to add. More friends, more experiences, more possessions, more achievements. But nobody teaches us to subtract, to let go, to create space." Marcus's eyes had a distant quality now, like he was seeing his own past. "I had a breaking point, Sarah, a moment where I realized I either needed to sort through my life or be buried by it. Lying in this bed, looking at mortality, you get very clear very fast about what actually matters. Sarah sat with that for a moment. The room was quiet, except for the steady beep of the heart monitor. Outside in the hallway, she could hear the usual hospital sounds, pages overhead, footsteps, distant conversations. But in here, in this small room with this wise stranger, everything felt still. "Can I tell you something?" Sarah asked suddenly. "My apartment is a disaster. Not just messy, like genuinely overwhelming. I have clothes I haven't worn in 2 years, books I'll never read, kitchen gadgets still in their boxes. And it's not just stuff. I have friendships that drain me, habits that aren't serving me. I'm on social media for hours but can't remember the last time I actually felt connected to anyone." She was surprised at her own honesty. She barely knew this man. Marcus smiled. "And how does all of that make you feel?" "Exhausted, guilty, overwhelmed, like I'm failing at being an adult." "What if I told you that those feelings are actually helpful? They're signals. Your life is telling you it needs sorting." "But where do I even start? It feels too big." "Start small. Seiri isn't about perfection. It's about progress." Marcus shifted to get more comfortable. "When I started, I began with one drawer, just one, in my office at home. I took everything out, looked at each item, and asked myself, do I use this? Does it serve a purpose? Does it bring me joy or value? If the answer was no, it went into a donation pile. Just one drawer? Just one drawer? And you know what happened? That one organized drawer became a small island of calm in the chaos. Every time I opened it and saw things in their place, I felt a tiny bit more in control. So I did another drawer, then a shelf, then a closet. And slowly, my physical space started to clear. But something else happened too. What? As the physical clutter decreased, so did the mental clutter. I started seeing more clearly, thinking more clearly. I started applying that same question. Does this serve a purpose? Does it bring value to other areas of my life? Relationships that were toxic, commitments I'd made out of obligation, beliefs about myself that were outdated, and I started sorting those too. Sarah felt a flutter of something she hadn't felt in months. Hope, maybe, or possibility. One drawer at a time, she repeated, one drawer at a time. Because here's what most people don't understand about Seiri. It's not about minimalism for the sake of having less. It's about clarity. When you remove what doesn't serve you, what remains becomes visible. And what remains is usually what matters most. The words settled into Sarah like seeds. She could feel them taking root. They talked for another 20 minutes, well beyond the time she was supposed to spend with any single patient. Marcus told her about his journey through the 5S principles, though he only touched on the first one tonight. He told her about how sorting his life had led to reconnecting with his daughter after years of distance, how it had helped him recognize which colleagues were genuine friends and which were just professional acquaintances, how it had even changed his approach to medicine, making him more present with each patient instead of rushing through a list. The other 4 principles build on Seiri, he said, as Sarah finally stood to leave. But you can't organize what you haven't sorted. You can't maintain what isn't essential. So it starts here, with the honest question, what do I actually need? Thank you, Sarah said, and she meant it more deeply than she'd meant anything in a long time. For seeing me, I guess, and for sharing this. Marcus smiled. Thank you for listening. Most people are too busy to listen anymore, but I have a feeling you're ready for something to shift." As Sarah left his room, she felt different. The hallway looked the same, the fluorescent lights just as harsh, the sounds just as chaotic. But something inside her had changed. A small door had opened. That night, when Sarah got home at 2 a.m., she didn't immediately collapse into bed like usual. Instead, she stood in her living room and really looked at it. She tried to see it the way Marcus had described, as if everything in her life was laid out in front of her. The coffee table was still cluttered. She walked over to it and started sorting through the mess. Medical journals. She picked up the top one, an article on trauma response protocols. Did she need this? She had digital access to everything. She set it in a recycle pile. The next journal, same thing. Within 5 minutes, she'd cleared 8 journals she'd been guilt-keeping. The takeout containers went straight to the trash. The mail got sorted, bills in one pile, junk in another, things that needed attention in a third. The charging cables got untangled and organized. She found a pen that had run out of ink weeks ago, 3 hair ties, and a grocery list from a month ago. It took 15 minutes, and the coffee table was clear. Sarah sat down on the couch and looked at the empty surface. It was such a small thing, just one table. But Marcus was right. Seeing that clear space, she felt something lift. Just a little. Just enough to notice. She looked at the pile of clothes on the couch next to her, her next island of calm. She began sorting. This pile, clothes that actually fit and she actually wore. This pile, clothes that didn't fit but she kept hoping would. This pile, clothes she never wore but kept because they were nice, or she'd spent money on them. This pile, clothes that needed washing. By 3:15 a.m., Sarah had 3 trash bags ready for donation and 1 load in the washing machine. Her couch was visible for the first time in weeks. She was exhausted, but it was a different kind of exhaustion, not the heavy, soul-crushing kind, more like the tiredness you feel after a good workout. Productive, accomplished. Before bed, she grabbed her phone. 17 unread messages. She started sorting those too. Her mom, important. She'd respond tomorrow. Friends she genuinely wanted to connect with, she'd respond. Group chats that were just noise, she muted them. Her ex's message from 3 months ago, she finally deleted it. Just like that, her inbox went from 17 to 5 messages that actually mattered. Sarah lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, and thought about Marcus's question, "What do you truly need?" She didn't have all the answers yet, but for the first time in months, she felt like maybe she could start finding them, one drawer at a time, one decision at a time, one clear space at a time. Outside her window, Boston slept. The Charles River flowed quietly in the darkness, and in a small Cambridge apartment, a 28-year-old nurse began the slow, sacred work of sorting her life. The journey of transformation had begun, and it started with a single question. What if I only kept what actually mattered? The next morning, Sarah woke up to sunlight streaming through her bedroom window. For the first time in weeks, she'd actually remembered to open the curtains before bed. The room looked different in daylight, still messy, but somehow less oppressive. The 3 donation bags sat by her closet like small victories. She reached for her phone. 7:47 a.m. She had the day off, a rare Wednesday with no obligations. Usually, These free days filled her with a vague anxiety about all the things she should be doing. But today felt different. Today, she had a plan. Sarah made coffee, actually made it, not just reheated yesterday's, and sat at her small kitchen table with a notebook. At the top of the page she wrote, "What do I actually need?" Then she sat there, pen hovering, unsure where to start. Marcus's voice echoed in her mind. "Start small, just observation. Name what's there." Okay, she could do that. She started listing categories, belongings, relationships, work commitments, digital life, habits, beliefs. Under belongings, she wrote, "Clothes I don't wear, books I won't read, kitchen gadgets still in boxes, furniture that doesn't fit the space, decorations that don't feel like me." Under relationships, she hesitated. This felt harder, more vulnerable, but she pushed through. Friends from college I keep in touch with out of guilt. Co-workers I grab drinks with but don't actually enjoy. Family obligations that drain me. Dating apps I swipe through mindlessly. Work commitments. Extra shifts I take to avoid saying no. Committee memberships that bore me. Conferences I attend for my resume, not growth. Digital life. Social media accounts I don't use. Email subscriptions I never read. Photos I never look at. Apps I downloaded once. Habits. Scrolling before bed. Eating lunch at my desk. Saying yes when I mean no. Apologizing for things that aren't my fault. Beliefs. I have to be productive every moment. Rest is lazy. If I'm not stressed, I'm not working hard enough. My worth comes from helping others. Setting boundaries makes me selfish. Sarah stared at the list. Seeing it all written out like this, it was overwhelming, but also clarifying. This wasn't just clutter. This was the architecture of her exhaustion. She thought about what Marcus had said. Seiri is triage for your life. Okay, so what needed immediate attention? She drew 3 columns next to her list. Critical, important, noise, and then slowly, honestly, she started sorting. By noon, Sarah had made decisions she'd been avoiding for months. She'd unsubscribed from 47 email lists, every single one that she'd been auto-deleting anyway. The dopamine hit of inbox 0 was immediate and surprising. She'd deleted 3 dating apps. She wasn't emotionally available anyway, and the mindless swiping was just another form of numbing out. She'd texted 2 friends from college, people she'd genuinely loved but had been maintaining surface-level contact with, and been honest. Hey, I love you, but I need to be real. I've been spread too thin and our friendship has become just checking boxes. Can we either commit to actually staying connected or give each other permission to let this naturally fade? No judgment either way. Both had responded with relief and appreciation. One wanted to actually reconnect. The other admitted she'd been feeling the same way. They agreed to let it go with love. It hurt, but it also felt like breathing. She looked at her closet, really looked at it, and pulled out everything she hadn't worn in a year. Not might wear someday. Actually worn. The pile was enormous. Designer jeans from when she was 22 that didn't fit anymore but represented money spent. Dresses for a life she didn't live. Professional clothes for a corporate job she'd never had. She took photos of the nicer items and listed them on second-hand apps. The rest went into donation bags. By 2 p.m., her bedroom closet had breathing room. She could see what she actually owned, and what she saw was simpler than she'd expected. She really only wore about 20% of her wardrobe anyway. But the real breakthrough came when she turned her attention to the harder stuff. the emotional clutter. Sarah pulled out her phone and looked at her text threads. There was someone she'd been avoiding confronting, her ex-boyfriend, Jason. They'd broken up 3 months ago, but he still texted occasionally. Nothing significant, just memes, random thoughts, "Hey, how are you" messages, and every time Sarah felt obligated to respond, to be nice, to not hurt his feelings. But the truth was, every text from him pulled her back into a relationship that was over, kept her from fully moving forward. Marcus's question rang in her head. Does this serve a purpose? Does it bring value? No. It served Jason's comfort, maybe, but not her growth. Sarah opened the message thread, typed carefully, "Jason, I need to be honest. These random check-ins aren't helping either of us move on. I care about you and wish you well, but I need clean closure. I'm going to step back from contact. I hope you understand." She hit send before she could second-guess herself. Her heart pounded. It felt mean, selfish, but also necessary. Within 5 minutes, he responded, "I get it. You're right. Take care of yourself, Sarah." And just like that, the weight lifted. Sarah realized something profound. Seiri wasn't just about removing bad things. Sometimes it was about removing good things that were in the way of better things. Jason wasn't a bad person. Those college friendships weren't toxic. The clothes weren't garbage, but they were taking up space, physical, mental, emotional, that she needed for what actually mattered. She thought about work, the extra shifts she'd taken next month. Did those serve a purpose beyond avoiding her uncomfortable feelings about having free time? Did they bring value beyond a paycheck she didn't actually need? She opened her work email and drafted a message to her supervisor. "Hi, Linda. I need to cancel the extra shifts I picked up for March. I've realized I need to prioritize rest and personal time. I hope this doesn't create too much trouble. Let me know if you need me to help find coverage." Her finger hovered over send for a full minute. This was her people-pleasing 101 nightmare. But she thought about Marcus lying in that hospital bed, finally clear about what mattered after spending decades saying yes to everything. She hit send. That evening, Sarah went for a walk. Something she used to do regularly but had stopped months ago because she was too busy. The Cambridge streets were alive with early spring energy. MIT students clustered outside coffee shops. Young families pushed strollers along the river. The air still had winter's bite, but you could feel change coming. She found herself at a small park bench overlooking the Charles River. The water moved steadily, carrying away whatever it touched. Sarah thought about how water didn't hold on to anything. It just flowed, picking up what it needed, releasing what it didn't. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "Haven't heard from you in a while. Everything okay?" Usually this would trigger guilt, the "I'm a bad daughter" spiral. But today, Sarah just responded honestly, "Hey, Mom, I'm okay. Going through some changes, figuring out what I need versus what I've been keeping out of obligation. I love you. Can I call you this weekend when I have real time to talk?" Her mom's response came quickly. "Of course, honey. Proud of you for taking time for yourself. Call whenever. No guilt trip, no manipulation, just support." Why had Sarah been so afraid of that? She realized so much of her clutter, especially the emotional kind, existed because she'd been too scared to communicate clearly. She said yes when she meant no, because she didn't want to disappoint people. She kept relationships on life support because she feared the discomfort of honesty. She held on to stuff because getting rid of it felt like admitting failure. But Seiri wasn't about failure. It was about clarity. Sarah pulled out her notebook and wrote, Seiri equals permission to choose. That's what this was really about. Not just removing clutter, but reclaiming her right to choose what she carried, what she gave her energy to, what she allowed to take up space in her limited, precious life. She thought about going back to work tomorrow, seeing Marcus, telling him about her progress, but then a thought struck her. What about the hospital itself? What about her work life? Sarah had been so focused on her personal space that she hadn't considered how cluttered her professional life had become. The way her nursing cart was always disorganized, the way she could never find the right equipment quickly, the way her digital patient files were a mess of duplicate entries and outdated notes. She thought about how many times she'd wasted precious minutes searching for supplies during emergencies, how the chaos of the workspace contributed to the chaos in her mind. If Seiri worked at home, why wouldn't it work at the hospital? The next night, Sarah arrived at Boston General 30 minutes before her shift. She'd never done that before. She was usually rushing in right at start time, already behind. But tonight, she had a mission. She went to her assigned ER station and looked at it with fresh eyes. The supply cart was a disaster. Bandages mixed with syringes, gloves in 3 different drawers, IV supplies scattered, nothing labeled, nothing in a consistent place. She thought about Marcus's words. When you remove what doesn't serve you, what remains becomes visible. Sarah started pulling everything out of the cart, every single item. She laid it all out on the counter and just looked at it. Some things were expired. Those went immediately into disposal. Some things were duplicates. She consolidated. Some things didn't belong in an ER cart at all. Why was there pediatric equipment in an adult emergency station? Within 20 minutes, she had everything sorted into piles. Keep, relocate, dispose, restock. Then she started putting things back, but differently, methodically. She grouped similar items together, put the most frequently used supplies at arm's reach, created a logical flow so that in an emergency she wouldn't have to think, just reach. What are you doing? Sarah turned to find her colleague Jennifer standing behind her, coffee in hand, looking confused. Organizing, Sarah said simply. At 10:30 p.m. on a Thursday? Are you okay? Sarah laughed. Actually, yeah. I'm realizing how much time I waste every shift looking for stuff. Thought I'd fix it. Jennifer looked at the organized cart, then at the chaos of her own station. Huh, that actually makes sense. Would you help me do mine sometime? Sure, Sarah said, surprised. She hadn't expected her small act of sorting to be contagious. By the time her shift officially started at 11 p.m., Sarah's station was transformed. Everything had a place. Everything was visible. And when the first patient came in, a car accident victim needing immediate IV access, Sarah's hands moved with a confidence she hadn't felt in months. She didn't fumble, didn't search, just reached for what she needed, found it exactly where it should be, and got to work. The patient stabilized quickly. The doctor gave her an appreciative nod, and Sarah felt something she'd almost forgotten: competence, clarity, control. Around 2 a.m., during a rare quiet moment, Sarah slipped into room 714 to check on Marcus. He was awake, reading a book by the dim light. "Sarah," he said warmly, "how are you?" "Better," she said and meant it. She began her routine vitals check, but this time everything felt different. She wasn't just going through motions. She was present. "You seem different tonight," Marcus observed. "I took your advice about Seiri. I've been sorting my apartment, my relationships, my commitments, even my workstation." She gestured back toward the ER. "And it's working. I feel lighter." Marcus's smile was knowing, gentle. "You've discovered the first truth. We hold on to so much more than we need. But there's a second truth you're about to learn." "What's that?" "Sorting is just the beginning. Once you know what matters, the next question becomes, how do you organize it so it actually serves you?" Sarah tilted her head. "What do you mean?" "Come here. Look at this." Marcus pointed to his bedside table. On it, a water bottle, his reading glasses, the call button, his phone, and a small notebook. "Everything I need is within arm's reach. Nothing I don't need is taking up space. But notice, it's not just about what's here. It's about where it is." Sarah looked closer. The water bottle was closest to his good hand. The call button was positioned so he could reach it even half asleep. The glasses were in a case so they wouldn't get scratched. The phone was charging, cord neatly coiled. "This is Seiton," Marcus said. "Set in order. Once you've sorted out what you need, you have to give everything its proper place. Not just any place, but the right place. The place where it functions best, where you can access it without friction, where it supports your life instead of complicating it." Sarah thought about her newly organized supply cart, how she'd instinctively put frequently used items at the front, how she'd grouped related things together. She'd been doing Seiton without knowing the name for it. "It's like strategic placement?" she asked. "Exactly. Think about your apartment. You've removed the clutter. That's Seiri. But now, where do the things you kept actually belong? Where's your coffee maker in relation to your mugs? Are your work scrubs near your bedroom or buried in a back closet? Is your journal where you can see it or hidden in a drawer where you'll forget about it?" Sarah's mind raced. She'd sorted her clothes, yes, but they were still kind of randomly distributed. Winter coats mixed with summer dresses, workout clothes in the same drawer as going-out tops. "There's a principle in design," Marcus continued, "called form follows function. The way you organize things should reflect how you actually use them. Not how you think you should use them or how someone else uses them, but how you, specifically, move through your life. So it's personalized. Completely. What works for me won't work for you. The key is observation. How do you naturally move? What do you reach for first in the morning? What causes friction in your daily routines? Seiton is about removing that friction by giving everything an intentional home." Sarah pulled out her phone and opened her notes app. "Can you give me examples? Like, how did you apply this?" Marcus settled back, clearly enjoying the conversation. "Well, I'm a morning person. I wake up alert and energized, so I put my exercise clothes right by my bed. First thing I see, no decisions, no barriers, just grab and go. But my wife, she's not a morning person. She needs coffee before she can think. So her setup is different. Coffee maker on a timer, mug already positioned, everything ready so she doesn't have to make decisions before caffeine. Different systems for different people." "Right. And it extends beyond physical stuff. Think about your time, your energy, your attention? Do you have a system for when you do certain tasks? Or do you just react to whatever's in front of you? Sarah thought about her chaotic work schedule, how she'd take on whatever shift needed coverage, regardless of whether it aligned with her natural rhythms, how she'd answer emails at all hours, how she had no structure to her days off. "I definitely just react," she admitted. Most people do. But Seiton asks, what if you organize your time the same way you organize your space? What if you set specific times for specific activities? What if you protected your high-energy hours for important work and your low-energy hours for rest? Sarah's vitals check was long forgotten at this point. She'd sat down in the chair next to Marcus's bed, completely absorbed. "This feels bigger than just organization," she said. "It is. Seiton is about designing a life that works for you instead of against you. It's about reducing decision fatigue by creating systems. It's about aligning your environment with your values and goals." How do I start? Marcus thought for a moment. Start by tracking yourself for a few days. Notice when you have the most energy, when you're most creative, when you tend to crash. Notice what obstacles keep appearing, what you're constantly searching for, what causes you stress. Then ask, how could I reorganize to eliminate those obstacles? Sarah nodded, taking mental notes. And remember, Marcus added, Seiton isn't about perfection. It's about fit. The goal isn't to have the most beautiful Instagram-worthy space. It's to have a functional space that supports you in living the life you actually want. A call bell rang somewhere in the ER. Sarah glanced at the door. "You should go," Marcus said. "But think about this. You've sorted. You've removed what doesn't serve you. Now give what remains a home, a proper home. Watch how much easier everything becomes." Sarah stood, squeezed his hand briefly. "Thank you. Again. For all of this. Thank you for listening and for caring enough to do the work." Over the next week, Sarah became obsessed with Seiton in the best possible way. She reorganized her entire apartment, but this time with intention. Her morning routine, everything she needed, was laid out in sequence. Alarm clock across the room so she had to get up. Workout clothes folded on the dresser. Water bottle filled and ready. Journal and pen on the kitchen table where she'd have her coffee. Her kitchen. Frequently used items in the front of cabinets. Rarely used items in the back or on high shelves. Spices alphabetized, which felt ridiculous but actually saved time. Cooking utensils in a container next to the stove, not in a drawer across the kitchen. Her workspace at home, laptop, charger, notebook, good pens, all in one designated spot, not spread across the apartment, not on the couch or the bed, one spot. So when she needed to focus, there was zero friction. Her evening routine, phone charging station in the living room, not the bedroom, book on the nightstand, lavender oil diffuser ready to go, everything set up to support sleep instead of scrolling. But the biggest shift came with her time. Sarah bought a simple planner and started blocking out her days. Not just work shifts, but everything. She identified that she had peak energy from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. on her days off. So that's when she scheduled anything important: meal prep, exercise, creative projects, difficult phone calls. She noticed she crashed around 3 p.m. every day. So that became her rest window. No guilt, no fighting it, just acceptance and organization around it. She realized she did her best thinking while walking, so she started taking a 20-minute walk before every shift to mentally prepare. She discovered that answering messages all day fragmented her attention, so she set specific times: 8 a.m., 1 p.m., and 7 p.m. 3 check-ins. That's it. The rest of the day, her phone stayed on Do Not Disturb. The changes were small individually, but collectively, they were transformative. Sarah started arriving at work feeling prepared instead of frazzled. Her apartment became a place she actually wanted to be, instead of a source of stress. Her relationships got deeper because she was giving them focused attention during designated times rather than scattered, distracted communication all day. One evening, Jennifer stopped by Sarah's organized supply station and said, "Okay, I need you to teach me whatever you're doing. I've watched you this week and you're like calm, efficient. What happened?" Sarah laughed. "I learned that chaos isn't inevitable. You can design your life. Can you help me design mine?" And just like that, Sarah found herself explaining Seiri and Seiton to Jennifer during their break, showing her how to sort supplies, how to organize her station based on how she actually worked, not how the hospital manual suggested. Within 2 days, Jennifer's station was transformed, and she'd texted Sarah, "Holy shit, I found bandages in 3 seconds during a trauma case." Game changer. The ripple effect had begun. But Sarah knew she wasn't done learning. Marcus had mentioned 5 principles. She'd only scratched the surface of 2. That night, back in room 714, she asked Marcus, "What's next?" "After sort and organize." Marcus smiled like he'd been waiting for that question. "Next," he said, "you learn to shine." Sarah had always thought of cleaning as a chore, something you did when things got bad enough, when the dishes piled up too high, when you couldn't ignore the dust anymore, when guests were coming over and you needed to make things presentable. But what Marcus was about to teach her would completely reframe what shine actually meant. It was a Saturday morning, 2 weeks into Sarah's transformation journey. Her apartment was more organized than it had been in years. She'd sorted ruthlessly, keeping only what served her. She'd arranged everything with intention, creating systems that supported her natural rhythms. Her workstation at the hospital was a model of efficiency that 3 other nurses had already copied. She felt good, proud even. But when she really looked, she started noticing things she'd missed. The baseboards in her apartment had a thin layer of dust. The inside of her kitchen cabinets, though organized, had coffee stains and crumbs in the corners. Her bathroom mirror was clean at face level, but spotted near the edges. The grout between her shower tiles had that slight discoloration she'd stopped seeing months ago. These weren't disasters. Her place wasn't dirty. But there was a difference between clean enough and truly maintained. Sarah thought about Marcus's hospital room. Every time she went in there, she noticed how he kept his small space immaculate, not obsessively, but attentively. He wiped down his bedside table daily. His water bottle never had that ring of condensation underneath. His call button cord was coiled, not tangled. Even his notebook was free of smudges. She'd assumed it was just his personality, but now she wondered if there was something more intentional happening. That evening, during her shift, Sarah found Marcus sitting up in bed, looking significantly healthier. His color was good. His eyes were bright. He'd be discharged soon, the doctor said. Maybe another week. The thought made Sarah unexpectedly sad. She'd come to look forward to these conversations, this unexpected mentorship that had emerged from their professional relationship. "You're looking well," she said, running through her standard checks. "Feeling well," Marcus confirmed. "The body heals when you give it what it needs: rest, nutrition, care." He paused. "Though I suspect the same could be said about the soul." Sarah smiled. "Are we doing philosophy tonight?" "Only if you're ready for the third principle." She pulled up her chair. "I was hoping you'd say that. I think I'm ready. Tell me first, how are Seiri and Seiton working for you?" Sarah thought about it. "Really well, actually. My apartment feels manageable. I know where everything is. I've cut out so much noise from my life. I have systems now that make everything easier." "But," Marcus prompted, sensing her hesitation, "but I don't know. Something still feels incomplete. Like I've organized everything, but I haven't really deepened my relationship with it. Does that make sense?" Marcus's eyes lit up. "That makes perfect sense, because you're ready for Seiso." "Seiso?" "Shine. But not the way most people think of shining, not just making things sparkle for show. Seiso is about maintaining what you've organized with genuine care. It's about attention to detail. It's about respecting your space and yourself, enough to keep things in excellent condition." Sarah leaned forward. "Tell me more." Marcus gestured around his hospital room. "Look at this space. It's not mine. I'm just temporarily borrowing it. But I keep it clean and orderly anyway. Why do you think that is?" "Because you respect it?" "Partly. But also because how I treat my environment affects how I feel in my environment. When I wipe down this table every morning, I'm not just cleaning a surface. I'm practicing mindfulness. I'm noticing. I'm caring. And that act of caring changes something in me." "It's meditative," Sarah said, understanding dawning. "Exactly. Seiso isn't about perfection. It's about presence. When you clean something, really clean it with attention, you're forced to see it, to notice the details you usually overlook, the scratches, the wear patterns, the places that need extra care." Sarah thought about her bathroom at home. She wiped down the counter regularly, sure, but when was the last time she'd actually cleaned behind the faucet? Or noticed the small crack developing in the corner of the mirror? "So it's about going deeper than surface level," she said, "much deeper. And here's what most people don't realize. Seiso applies to everything, not just physical spaces, but mental spaces, emotional spaces, even relationships." Marcus shifted to get more comfortable, and Sarah instinctively adjusted his pillows without thinking about it. He smiled at the gesture. "Think about it this way," he continued. "You've sorted your friendships. You've organized your time with people. But do you maintain those relationships with care? Do you notice when someone seems off? Do you clean up small misunderstandings before they become big problems? Do you polish the connection with regular, genuine attention?" Sarah felt something click. She thought about her friend Monica, who she'd known since nursing school. They texted regularly, grabbed coffee sometimes. But when was the last time Sarah had really checked in? Not just, "How are you?" but really asked, really listened, really noticed. "I think I've been maintaining relationships at surface level," Sarah admitted. "Most people do, because deep maintenance takes time, attention, energy. It's easier to just let things coast. But here's what happens when you do that. Dust accumulates. Small problems become big ones. Things you once valued start to deteriorate, and eventually you lose what you weren't caring for. The words hit Sarah hard. She thought about her relationship with her work. She'd organized her station, yes, but was she maintaining her skills? Was she staying current with best practices? Or was she just coasting on what she already knew? She thought about her relationship with herself, her body. When was the last time she'd really paid attention to how she felt physically? Not just tired or fine, but really tuned in. "How do I practice Seiso?" Sarah asked quietly. Marcus smiled. "You start small, like always. Pick one thing, one space, one relationship, one practice, and commit to maintaining it with genuine attention. Not just wiping down the surface, but really caring for it, noticing the details, addressing small problems immediately, treating it like something valuable." "Can you give me an example from your life?" "Sure. When I was practicing surgery, I had a ritual every morning. I'd arrive at my office 30 minutes early. I'd clean my desk, not just shuffle papers, but really clean it. Wipe every surface, organize every drawer, and while I did that, I'd mentally prepare for the day. I'd think through my surgeries. I'd notice if I was feeling anxious or confident. I'd check in with myself. And that made a difference? Enormous difference. Because those 30 minutes of Seiso weren't just about having a clean desk. They were about being present, about caring enough to maintain excellence, about noticing small things before they became big things. I caught potential surgical complications during those morning reflections because I was in the practice of noticing details. Sarah was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. "What about when things get busy?" she asked. "Like, I can maintain attention when I have time, but in the ER, when everything's chaos." "That's when Seiso matters most," Marcus said firmly. "When things are chaotic is precisely when you need the discipline of attention to detail. Because small oversights in chaos become major problems. A medication dosage missed, a symptom overlooked, a piece of equipment not properly cleaned." Sarah nodded slowly. She'd seen it happen. The errors that occurred during rush periods, almost always because someone was moving too fast to notice. Seiso is saying that even, especially in chaos, you pause to care, she said. "Yes, you clean as you go. You maintain as you work. You don't let problems accumulate just because you're busy, because busy is when problems accumulate fastest." Sarah thought about her supply cart. She'd organized it beautifully, but already 2 weeks later, she'd noticed little bits of degradation. A drawer that was getting messy again. Supplies that weren't quite back where they belonged. Nothing major, but the beginning of entropy. "So Seiso is the thing that keeps Seiri and Seiton from falling apart," she said. "Exactly. You can sort and organize all you want, but without the discipline of maintenance, you're back to chaos within weeks. Seiso is the daily practice that sustains the system." A nurse poked her head in. "Sarah, we've got incoming. Multi-car accident." Sarah stood immediately. "I have to go." "Go," Marcus said. "But remember, even in the chaos, especially in the chaos, shine." The ER erupted into controlled chaos. 4 patients from a highway pileup. 2 critical, 2 stable, but injured. Sarah moved into action, her training taken over. But this time, something was different. Even in the rush, she found herself practicing Seiso without thinking about it. After starting an IV, she immediately disposed of the packaging instead of leaving it on the tray. After grabbing supplies, she returned them to their exact spot, not just close enough. When she wiped blood from a patient's arm, she took an extra second to make sure she'd gotten it all, not just most of it. Small things, tiny acts of care and attention. But the cumulative effect was remarkable. Her workspace stayed clear. She didn't have to search for anything. The attending physician complimented her efficiency, and somehow, despite the chaos, Sarah felt calm, grounded, present, because she was practicing attention, maintenance, shine. When the rush finally ended around 4 a.m., Sarah looked at her station. It was still organized, still clean, because she'd maintained it throughout the chaos rather than letting it deteriorate and promising to fix it later. Jennifer walked by, her own station a disaster of used supplies and scattered equipment. She looked at Sarah's area and shook her head. "How do you do that? How is your space still perfect?" "It's not perfect," Sarah said, "but I clean as I go, little by little. It takes the same amount of time ultimately, but it's distributed instead of all at once." That actually makes sense. Jennifer started gathering the trash from her station. "I always tell myself I'll clean up later, but later never comes." "Later compounds," Sarah said, echoing something Marcus had taught her. "Small messes become big messes. Small problems become big problems, but small acts of care prevent both." Over the next week, Sarah became obsessive about Seiso, but not in a neurotic way, in a mindful way. Every morning she spent 10 minutes doing a full clean of her apartment, not just tidying, but really cleaning one area thoroughly. Monday, bathroom deep clean. Tuesday, kitchen. Wednesday, bedroom. Thursday, living room. Friday, entryway and miscellaneous. Saturday and Sunday, rest or catch-up. At first, it felt like extra work, but she quickly noticed something. Because she was doing these deep cleans weekly, they never took long. There was never a buildup of grime, never a overwhelming mess. Just small maintenance that kept everything consistently good. She applied the same principle to her car, which she'd been neglecting for months. Every time she got in, she grabbed any trash and took it with her. Every Sunday, she did a full vacuum and wiped down. Within 3 weeks, her car felt new again. But the real transformation came when she started applying Seiso to less tangible things. Her digital life. She set up a system where every Friday she went through her phone, deleted unnecessary photos, cleared old messages, unsubscribed from any new email lists that had crept in, organized her apps. It took 15 minutes and kept her digital space from becoming overwhelming. Her relationships. She started a practice she called connection maintenance. Every week, she reached out to one person she cared about. Not with a generic, "How are you?" text, but with something specific. A memory, a genuine question. "I was thinking about you because..." It took barely any time, but the impact on her relationships was profound. Her friend Monica texted her after one of these check-ins. "This is random, but I really needed this today. Thank you for being such a good friend." Sarah realized that most people weren't used to being noticed, to being genuinely attended to. Say-so in relationships was rare and powerful. She applied it to her work skills too. Instead of letting her nursing knowledge slowly become outdated, she committed to 15 minutes of learning every day, reading one medical article, watching one training video, practicing one skill, small, consistent, cumulative. After a month, she'd learned 3 new techniques and caught a potential medication interaction that a less current nurse might have missed. But perhaps the most profound application of Seiso came in how Sarah started treating herself. She'd always been good at caring for others, but caring for herself, that felt selfish, indulgent, unnecessary, until she realized she was also something that needed maintenance, her body, her mind, her spirit. Sarah started a morning practice, not a huge routine, but a genuine one. 10 minutes of stretching, really feeling her body, noticing tight spots, caring for them. 5 minutes of meditation, not trying to empty her mind, but just noticing what was there, acknowledging it, like cleaning dust off a surface, seeing what had accumulated overnight and gently clearing it. She noticed that on days when she did this practice, her entire day went better. She was more patient with difficult patients, more resilient in stressful situations, more present in conversations. Because she'd taken time to maintain herself, she had more to give. One evening, Sarah was cleaning her bathroom mirror, really cleaning it, every corner, every spot, when she caught her own reflection, really looked at herself. She looked different, not physically, though she did seem more rested, but there was something in her eyes, a clarity, a presence. She looked like someone who was taking care of herself, who valued herself enough to maintain, not just survive. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. When had she stopped valuing herself? When had good enough become her standard for how she treated her own life? She thought about Marcus, lying in that hospital bed, maintaining his small space with such care, not because it was his space, because maintaining things with attention was how he maintained himself, his dignity, his peace. The next night at work, Sarah brought something special to Marcus's room, a small succulent plant in a ceramic pot. "What's this?" he asked, smiling. "A thank you gift for teaching me to shine." She placed it on his bedside table. "It needs very little care, just a little water once a week, a little attention, but it'll last for years if you maintain it." Marcus touched one of the small leaves gently. "This is perfect. Thank you, Sarah." "I've been practicing Seiso," she said, settling into her usual chair. "In my apartment, at work, in my relationships, even with myself. And it's transformative isn't too strong a word." "Tell me." Sarah described everything, the cleaning routines, the relationship maintenance, the self-care practices, how she'd stopped letting small things slide, how she'd started noticing details, how the cumulative effect of small acts of care had shifted her entire experience of life. "I feel more grounded," she said, "more present, like I'm actually living my life instead of just enduring it." Marcus listened with that quiet attention that had become so familiar, so valuable. "You've discovered something most people never learn," he said finally. "That maintenance is a form of love. When you care for something, a space, a relationship, a skill, yourself, you're saying it matters. You're saying it's worth your attention. And that act of caring changes you as much as it changes what you're caring for." "It feels almost spiritual," Sarah admitted. "Like when I'm cleaning my kitchen with real attention, I'm not just cleaning. I'm practicing presence, gratitude, respect." That's exactly what it is. Seiso, at its deepest level, is a spiritual practice. It's about seeing the sacred in the mundane, finding the meditation in maintenance, honoring what you have by caring for it. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. "There's something else I've noticed," Sarah said. When I practice Seiso, I catch problems early. Like, I noticed a weird noise in my car because I was paying attention, and it turned out the brake pads were wearing down. I caught it before it became dangerous. Same thing with a patient last week. I noticed a subtle change in skin color that everyone else missed because I was really looking, really paying attention. That's the hidden gift of Seiso, Marcus said. Preventive care. When you maintain with attention, you see what's starting to go wrong before it becomes a crisis. In machines, in bodies, in relationships, in your own mental health. Sarah thought about that. How many problems in her life had started small and snowballed because she wasn't paying attention? How many relationships had deteriorated because she didn't notice the small hurts? How many opportunities had she missed because she wasn't present enough to see them? Seiso is how you catch life before it slips away, she said quietly. Yes, Marcus agreed. Exactly. Yes. Over the following week, Sarah noticed ripple effects from her Seiso practice that she hadn't anticipated. Her patients noticed. Not consciously, maybe, but she could feel it. When she took time to really clean their space, really arrange their comfort, really pay attention to small details, they relaxed more, trusted more, healed better. One patient, an elderly woman named Dorothy recovering from pneumonia, said something that stuck with Sarah. You're different from the other nurses. Not better, just more here, like you actually see me. Sarah realized that Seiso made people feel seen, because when you practice attention on their environment, they feel that attention extending to them. Her colleagues noticed too. Jennifer had fully adopted the Seiso practice, maintaining her station with care instead of letting it deteriorate between deep cleans. 2 other nurses asked Sarah to teach them her system. But it wasn't a system, Sarah tried to explain. It was a practice, a mindset, a commitment to caring for what you valued, though she did help them set up basic routines. Because sometimes people need structure before they can understand the spirit. The most unexpected change came in how Sarah experienced difficult moments. There was a night when they lost a patient, a young guy, early 30s, cardiac arrest. They'd done everything right. But sometimes, everything right isn't enough. The old Sarah would have pushed the grief down, moved to the next patient, told herself she couldn't afford to feel, but Seiso had taught her something. Emotions also need maintenance, need attention, need care. So Sarah took 10 minutes after that death. She went to the staff bathroom, washed her face slowly, looked at herself in the mirror, and acknowledged what she was feeling. Sadness, helplessness, grief. She didn't try to fix it or make it go away. She just cleaned the emotional surface, saw what was there, honored it, let it be. Then she went back to work, not numb, not broken, just present. Her supervisor, Linda, caught her in the hallway later. You okay? I heard about the code. I'm sad, Sarah said honestly, but I'm okay. I took a moment to process instead of pushing it down. Linda looked surprised, then thoughtful. I should do that more. I think we all should. Another ripple. On Sarah's next day off, she did something she'd been avoiding for months. She called her mother and had a real conversation. Not the surface level, I'm fine, how are you? Exchange. A real one. She told her mom about Marcus, about the 5S principles, about how she was learning to maintain her life with care instead of just surviving it. Her mother listened quietly, then said, Honey, I'm so proud of you. I've been worried. You've seemed so stressed lately, so not yourself. But you sound different now, lighter. I feel lighter, Mom, like I've been carrying all this weight I didn't need to carry. And now I'm learning what's actually mine to hold and how to hold it with care. They talked for an hour, really talked. Sarah learned things about her mother she'd never known, her mom's own struggles with overwhelm, her regrets about not setting better boundaries, her admiration for Sarah's courage in doing the work now instead of waiting until crisis forced it. It was a form of Seiso, Sarah realized, maintaining the relationship with her mother, cleaning up old assumptions, polishing the connection with genuine attention. When they hung up, Sarah felt something she'd been missing for years, true connection, not performance, not obligation, just love, maintained. That night, Sarah sat in her clean, organized, well-maintained apartment and wrote in her journal, "Seiso has taught me that maintenance is not a chore. It's a practice of love. Every time I clean something with attention, I'm saying, this matters. You matter. I matter. Life is precious enough to care for. Small acts of daily maintenance prevent large acts of desperate repair. In spaces, in relationships, in health, in everything. Shine is not about perfection. It's about presence. It's about noticing. It's about caring enough to see what needs attention and giving it. I used to think cleaning was shallow, but there's nothing shallow about treating your environment and yourself with respect and care. There's nothing shallow about presence. Seiso is how you honor what you have while you have it. She closed the journal and looked around. Everything in its place. Everything cared for. Not perfect, but maintained. Valued, honored. Outside her window, Boston sparkled with lights. The Charles River flowed quietly. And in a small Cambridge apartment, a 28-year-old nurse understood something profound. The way you care for the small things determines the quality of everything. Shine was not about sparkle. It was about sacred attention to the life you were actually living. The next evening, Marcus had news. "They're discharging me tomorrow," he said when Sarah came in for her shift. Sarah felt a pang of loss. She'd known it was coming, but still. "That's wonderful," she said, meaning it despite her sadness. "You've healed so well." "Thanks to excellent care," Marcus said, looking at her meaningfully. "From excellent nurses who actually pay attention." Sarah smiled. "I learned from an excellent teacher." "You learned because you were ready to learn. That's different." Marcus paused. "But our lessons aren't done yet. There are 2 more principles, and they might be the most important ones." "Will you tell me before you go?" "Yes, because the 4th and 5th principles are about sustaining what you've learned, and I suspect you'll need them." Sarah pulled up her chair one last time. "I'm listening." "Good," Marcus said, "because tomorrow we talk about how to make all of this permanent, how to standardize the care so it becomes who you are, not just what you do." Sarah leaned forward, ready. The journey was far from over. In fact, the deepest work was just beginning. Marcus was being discharged at noon, which meant Sarah had to come in during the day, outside her usual night shifts, to say goodbye. She'd switched schedules with Jennifer, who'd understood immediately when Sarah explained. "That's the patient who taught you all this stuff, right?" Jennifer had said. "Go, I've got your shift." Now, At 11:30 a.m. on a sunny Thursday, Sarah stood outside room 714 with a card she'd written the night before. Inside, she could hear Marcus talking with his daughter, a woman's voice, warm and animated. Sarah didn't want to interrupt, so she waited in the hallway. Through the partially open door, she caught fragments of their conversation. "Really proud of you, Dad. You did the work even in here. Wasn't easy, but I had good motivation. Good teachers, too, actually. The nurse you mentioned, the one you've been talking to?" Sarah smiled. She'd been teaching Marcus. She'd thought it was entirely the other way around. The daughter emerged a few minutes later, a woman in her early 40s, with Marcus's same thoughtful eyes. She saw Sarah and seemed to recognize her immediately. "You must be Sarah," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Rebecca. Dad's told me so much about you." "All good, I hope," Sarah said, shaking her hand. "Very good. He said you reminded him why he became a doctor in the first place, that you actually see people." Rebecca's eyes were warm. "Thank you for that. And for listening to his philosophizing. I know he can go on. I learned more from him than he probably learned from me." "I doubt that's true. But either way, thank you." Rebecca glanced back toward the room. "He's almost ready. You should go in." Sarah entered to find Marcus fully dressed in street clothes, dark jeans, a button-down shirt, comfortable shoes. It was startling to see him as a regular person instead of a patient. He looked good, healthy, strong. "Sarah," he said, his face lighting up, "I was hoping you'd make it. I wouldn't miss it." She handed him a card. "Just something small." He opened it immediately. Inside, Sarah had written, "Thank you for teaching me to see my life clearly, to sort what matters, to organize with intention, to maintain with care. I'll carry these lessons forward." Sarah Marcus read it twice, then looked up with moisture in his eyes. "This means more than you know." "You changed my life," Sarah said simply, "in a hospital room, in the middle of the night, when I was drowning and didn't even know it." "You were ready to change. I just offered some tools." Marcus gestured to the chair. "Sit for a minute. I want to tell you about the last 2 principles before I go. Will you humor an old man?" Sarah sat. "Always." Marcus settled onto the edge of the hospital bed, his packed bag beside him. "You've learned Seiri, Seiton, and Seiso. Sort, organize, shine, the foundation. But here's what happens to most people. They do the work, they feel great, and then life gets chaotic and everything falls apart again. They go back to clutter, back to overwhelm, back to where they started." Sarah nodded. She'd already felt that pull, the temptation to skip her morning cleaning routine when she was tired, the urge to let her supply cart slide back into disorganization when shifts got busy. "That's where Seiketsu comes in," Marcus continued. "Standardize. It means creating systems that make the good practices automatic, building routines that don't require constant willpower, making the healthy choice the default choice." "Like habits?" Sarah asked. "Deeper than habits. Habits are individual actions. Standardization is about creating an entire environment, physical, mental, social, that supports the behavior you want. It's about making the right thing easy and the wrong thing hard." Marcus stood and walked to his bedside table, where the succulent Sarah had given him sat. "Look at this plant. For it to thrive, it doesn't need me to remember to water it every day. It needs a system." So what did I do? I put it in a spot where I see it every morning when I take my medications. I linked the watering to an existing routine. That's standardization. I removed the need to remember by building it into my environment. Sarah pulled out her phone and started taking notes. So, it's about removing friction from good behaviors and adding friction to bad ones. Exactly. Think about your apartment. You've organized it beautifully, but how do you keep it that way? You standardize. You create routines that happen at the same time in the same way, so they become automatic. You set up your environment so that putting things back in their place is easier than leaving them out. I've kind of been doing that, Sarah said. Like, I put a small trash can next to my couch because I kept leaving wrappers and stuff there. Now I just drop them in the can. Same action, but the outcome is different because I changed the environment. Perfect example, that's Seiketsu in action. Marcus smiled. And it applies to everything. Your work, your relationships, your health. Anywhere you want consistent good outcomes, you need standardized systems. Sarah thought about her workstation. She'd organized it, yes, and she'd been maintaining it. But what if she created a checklist, a standard operating procedure that she followed every shift? Then it wouldn't depend on her mood or energy. It would just be the protocol. I can see how this would work at an individual level, Sarah said. But what about when you're part of a team? How do you standardize when other people are involved? Marcus's eyes lit up. That's where it gets really interesting. Seiketsu isn't just personal, it's cultural. When you standardize good practices within a group, you create a shared expectation. Everyone knows what good looks like. Everyone follows the same protocols, and that creates accountability. He gestured around the hospital room. Think about medical care. Why do hospitals have standard procedures for everything? Because when stakes are high and people are stressed, you can't rely on individual judgment alone. You need systems, checklists, protocols, everyone following the same high standards. So, I should create standards for my team at the ER? You should propose them. Share what's working for you. Make it easy for others to adopt. Because here's what happens when you standardize within a group. The standard becomes the culture, and culture is incredibly powerful. It's easier to maintain a good practice when everyone around you is doing it too. Sarah thought about Jennifer and the 2 other nurses who'd adopted her organizational system. What if they all agreed on a standard? What if every nurse in the ER followed the same supply cart organization, the same cleaning protocols, the same communication procedures? The efficiency gains would be enormous. But more than that, the culture would shift from chaotic to ordered, from reactive to proactive. How do I get people to buy in? Sarah asked. I'm not a manager. I'm just a regular nurse. You don't need authority to create change, Marcus said. You need a good example and genuine enthusiasm. Show people how standardization makes their lives easier, not harder. Start small. Get a few early adopters. Let the results speak for themselves. He paused, then added, and here's the key. Make it voluntary. Invite, don't mandate. When people choose to adopt a standard because they see the value, they own it. They maintain it. But when they're forced, they resist. Sarah nodded, taking notes. There's one more aspect of Seiketsu I want to mention, Marcus said. Personal standards, not just routines, but the standards you hold for yourself. What behaviors are non-negotiable? What practices do you commit to no matter what? Like boundaries? Exactly like boundaries. Standardizing boundaries means you don't have to decide in the moment. You've already decided. You have a policy. Marcus sat back down. For me, one of my personal standards is I don't check work email after 7 p.m., period. No exceptions. That's the standard. It removes the decision fatigue. It protects my personal time without me having to negotiate with myself every evening. Sarah thought about her own boundaries, or lack thereof. She said yes to almost every extra shift request. She answered texts at all hours. She apologized for things that weren't her fault. She let people's bad moods affect her peace. I need to standardize my boundaries, she said quietly. Most people do, because without standards, you're vulnerable to every request, every pressure, every guilt trip. But with standards, you have a policy, a line. And holding a line is easier than drawing a new one every time. They talked for another 20 minutes about implementation. Marcus shared examples from his surgical practice, how he'd standardized his pre-surgery preparation, his communication with patients, his post-op follow-up, how these standards had improved outcomes and reduced his stress. Sarah shared her ideas about creating ER protocols. Marcus helped her refine them, suggesting she start with a pilot program with willing participants rather than trying to change everything at once. Remember, he said, Seiketsu is about sustainability. You're not looking for perfection. You're looking for consistent good enough that lasts. A B+ every day beats an A+ once and then burning out. Finally, Rebecca poked her head in. Dad, we need to get going if we're going to beat traffic. Marcus stood, and Sarah stood with him. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Thank you, Sarah said, for everything, for seeing me, for teaching me, for changing my life. Marcus stepped forward and hugged her, a genuine, warm embrace. Thank you for listening, for doing the work, for proving that these principles still matter in a world that feels increasingly chaotic. He pulled back, hands on her shoulders. There's one more principle, Shitsuke, sustain. It's about discipline and continuous improvement, making this a lifelong practice, not a temporary fix. Promise me you'll keep going, keep refining, keep growing. I promise, Sarah said, and meant it with everything in her. Good, because the world needs people like you, people who care enough to do the work. Rebecca appeared with a wheelchair, hospital policy for discharge. Marcus made a face but sat down with good humor. As they left the room, Marcus turned back one more time. One more thing, Sarah. Teach others. Don't keep this to yourself. The principles multiply when shared. I will, Sarah called after him. And then he was gone, down the hallway, into the elevator, out of the hospital, out of her daily life, but not out of her story. Sarah stood in the empty room for a moment, feeling the weight of what she'd received. Then she looked down at her notes. Pages of wisdom. Principles for living. She had work to do. Over the next month, Sarah became a quiet revolutionary at Boston General. She didn't make grand announcements or demand sweeping changes. She simply standardized her own practices and invited others to notice. First, she created a one-page laminated guide for her supply cart. A simple diagram showing where everything belonged. Color-coded sections, clear labels. She posted it on the side of her cart where anyone could see it. Within a week, Jennifer asked for a copy. then another nurse, David, then the new hire, a young guy named Chris who was overwhelmed by the ER's chaos. Sarah made copies for anyone who asked. No pressure, no judgment, just, here's what works for me. Feel free to use it or modify it. By the end of the month, 8 nurses were using variations of her system. The supply closet supervisor noticed and asked Sarah to present her system at the monthly staff meeting. Sarah was terrified. Public speaking wasn't her thing, but she thought about Marcus's words, teach others. The principles multiply when shared. She said yes. The presentation was simple, 15 minutes. She explained Seiri, Seiton, and Seiso using her own journey as an example. She showed before and after photos of her supply cart. She shared efficiency metrics, how much faster she could grab supplies during emergencies now. But she also talked about the why, about how organization reduced stress, how maintenance created pride, how standardization made consistency easy instead of hard. I'm not saying everyone should do exactly what I do, Sarah concluded. I'm saying find what works for you, standardize it, and make it easy to maintain. Your future self will thank you. The response was mixed. Some people were enthusiastic. Others were skeptical. This sounded like extra work, and they were already stretched thin. But Linda, the ER supervisor, was sold. Sarah, I'd like to pilot this approach with volunteers. Would you be willing to coach a small group? Sarah hesitated. Coaching? That sounded official, serious. But again, teach others. Yes, Sarah said, I can do that. The pilot group consisted of 5 nurses, Jennifer, David, Chris, and 2 others, Amanda and Priya. They met for 30 minutes before shifts, twice a week. Sarah facilitated, but mostly she just shared what had worked for her and helped them customize it for their needs. Amanda was a single mom, constantly overwhelmed by the balance of work and home. Sarah helped her apply Seiketsu to her morning routine. They standardized exactly what happened when. Kids up at 6:30, breakfast at 6:45, backpacks by the door, everyone out at 7:30. No decisions, no chaos, just a system. It's changed everything, Amanda reported after 2 weeks. I'm not yelling anymore. We're not late. The kids actually seem calmer. I didn't realize how much my disorganization was affecting them. Priya struggled with work-life boundaries. She answered messages at all hours, felt guilty saying no, and was burning out. Sarah helped her establish personal standards. No work texts after 8 p.m., no extra shifts on Sundays. That was family time, non-negotiable. An auto-reply on her email that set clear expectations about response times. At first I felt so guilty, Priya admitted, like I was being selfish. But then I realized I'm a better nurse when I'm rested, better wife when I'm present, better human when I'm not exhausted. The boundaries aren't selfish, they're necessary. David wanted to apply the principles to his financial life, which was a mess. Sarah didn't know much about finance, but she knew the principles were universal. Together, they created a system. Automatic transfers to savings every payday, a standardized budget, a weekly money check-in every Sunday morning. I've been avoiding this for years, David said, but making it automatic, making it a system instead of a decision, it just works. I don't have to be disciplined. The system is disciplined for me. Chris, the new nurse, was struggling with skill development. He felt behind, inadequate. Sarah helped him create a learning standardization. 15 minutes every shift, he'd review one procedure. Keep a log. Track progress. It's not about becoming perfect overnight, Sarah told him. It's about consistent small improvement. B plus every day. The phrase became a mantra for the group. B plus every day. Not perfection, not burnout. Just consistent good enough that accumulated into excellence over time. 3 months after Marcus's discharge, Sarah received an email. Subject: Coffee? Sarah: I hope this message finds you well. Rebecca mentioned you'd given me your email at discharge. I wanted to reach out and see how you're doing, how the principles are working for you, and whether you'd be interested in meeting for coffee sometime. I'd love to hear about your journey. There's also something I'd like to discuss with you, an opportunity that might interest you. Best. Marcus. Sarah stared at the email, surprised and delighted. She responded immediately. Marcus: I would love to have coffee. I've been thinking about you often, wondering how you're doing. The principles have transformed my life and work in ways I'm still discovering. I'd love to tell you about it, and I'm definitely curious about this opportunity. Are you free this Saturday? Sarah. They met at a small cafe in Cambridge near Harvard Square. Marcus was already there when Sarah arrived, looking healthy and vibrant. He stood to greet her, hugging her warmly. You look wonderful, he said, rested, centered. I feel it, Sarah said honestly. The work continues, but it gets easier. Over lattes, Sarah caught him up on everything. The pilot group, the presentation, the slow cultural shift happening in the ER, the personal transformations she was witnessing. Marcus listened with that same attentive presence she remembered from the hospital. When she finished, he was smiling. You've become a teacher, he said, whether you plan to or not. It happened accidentally, but I love it. Helping people find their own systems, their own standards, it's incredibly fulfilling. Which brings me to the opportunity I mentioned. Marcus leaned forward. I'm involved with a non-profit organization called the Sustainable Practice Initiative. We teach the 5S principles to healthcare workers, schools, community organizations, anyone who wants to reduce chaos and increase effectiveness. We're looking for facilitators, people who've lived the principles and can teach them authentically. Sarah's heart beat faster. You're asking if I'd be interested? I'm asking if you'd consider training with us. It's a 6-month program. You'd learn facilitation techniques, group dynamics, advanced applications of the principles, and then you'd lead workshops, mostly evenings and weekends, so it wouldn't interfere with your nursing, though eventually some people do transition to doing it full time. Sarah sat back, overwhelmed. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything now. Think about it. But Sarah, you have a gift for this. You meet people where they are. You make the principles accessible without dumbing them down. You embody them without being preachy. That's rare. Can I ask you something? Sarah said. Why me? I mean, I'm sure there are more experienced people. Experienced teaching isn't the same as experienced living. You're in the middle of your transformation. You remember what it feels like to be overwhelmed, stuck, drowning in clutter. That empathy, that's what makes a great facilitator. Plus, you're a nurse. You understand the specific challenges healthcare workers face. You can speak their language. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. A year ago, she'd been barely surviving, going through the motions. And now, Someone was asking her to teach others how to thrive. "I need to think about it," she said, "but thank you for seeing this in me." "Take your time. There's no rush." Marcus paused. "But before you decide, I want to tell you about the fifth principle, Shitsuke, because it's the one that determines whether all of this becomes who you are or just something you did once." Sarah pulled out her phone to take notes. Even in a cafe, the student in her was ready. "Shitsuke means sustain," Marcus began. "But it's deeper than just maintaining what you built. It's about discipline and continuous improvement. It's about making the practice non-negotiable, part of your identity." "How is that different from Seiketsu?" Sarah asked. "Seiketsu creates the systems. Shitsuke is the commitment to those systems even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." Marcus wrapped his hands around his coffee cup. "Think about it this way. Seiketsu is the map. Shitsuke is the journey. One gives you the route. The other is actually walking it every day for the rest of your life." Sarah absorbed that. "So, it's about long-term commitment?" "Yes, but also about evolution. Shitsuke includes kaizen, continuous improvement. You don't just sustain what is, you keep refining it. Keep asking, how can this be even better? What's not working anymore? What needs to change as I change?" So it's not static. Nothing worth sustaining is static. You're not the same person you were 6 months ago. Your needs have changed. Your life has changed. Shitsuke says, keep the principles, but adapt the application. Stay committed to growth, not to specific methods. Marcus pulled out a small notebook, the same one Sarah had seen in his hospital room, and showed her a page. It was filled with dated entries, each one a small reflection or adjustment. March 15th. Morning routine taking too long. Adjust. Lay out clothes the night before. April 2nd. Forgetting to call Mom weekly. New standard every Sunday at 4 p.m. May 10th. Email standardization slipping. Recommit. Check only at 9, 12, and 4. June 8th. Finding exercise boring. Adjust. Join a cycling group for accountability. This is my Shitsuke journal, Marcus explained. Every week, I review my systems. What's working? What's not? What needs tweaking? It takes maybe 10 minutes, but it keeps me honest, keeps me improving. Sarah was fascinated. So Shitsuke is like a meta practice, a practice of practicing. Exactly. It's the discipline of discipline, the commitment to stay committed. Because here's the truth, Sarah, life will test you. You'll get busy, stressed, sick, distracted. And when that happens, your systems will be tempted to fall apart. Shitsuke is what keeps you coming back, what makes you choose the higher standard even when the lower one would be easier. How do you maintain that level of discipline without burning out? Marcus smiled. By making it about identity, not willpower. Willpower is finite, but identity is renewable. When you see yourself as someone who maintains order, you don't have to force it. It's just who you are. He leaned in. Here's what I mean. You probably don't struggle to brush your teeth, right? Why? Because you're someone who brushes their teeth. It's part of your identity. You'd feel weird not doing it. Shitsuke is about making organization, maintenance, and continuous improvement just as much a part of your identity as dental hygiene. Sarah thought about her morning cleaning routine. At first, it had required discipline, but now she felt off when she skipped it. It was part of who she was, a person who cared for her space. I think I'm already starting to feel that, she said. Like the other day I was exhausted, and almost didn't organize my supply cart. But it actually felt wrong, uncomfortable, so I did it anyway. Not because I forced myself, but because it's just what I do now. That's Shitsuke emerging, Marcus said. That shift from I should to I am. That's when the practice becomes sustainable, when it's not something you do, but someone you are. They talked for another hour. Marcus shared stories of people who'd mastered Shitsuke, a teacher who'd maintained her classroom organization for 30 years, adapting it as teaching methods changed, but never abandoning the core principles. A small business owner who'd reviewed his systems every quarter for 2 decades, always finding ways to improve. The key is patience, Marcus said. Shitsuke isn't sexy. It's not dramatic. It's just showing up day after day, year after year, committed to being a little bit better. But that's how transformation becomes permanent. Not through big moments, but through small, repeated choices. As they prepared to leave, Marcus handed Sarah a book, The Practice of Practice, Sustaining Excellence Through Continuous Improvement. Read this when you're ready, he said. And Sarah, whatever you decide about the facilitator program, know this. You've already succeeded. You've taken chaos and created order. You've taken overwhelm and created peace. You've taken scattered energy and created focus. That's remarkable. Whether you teach it to others or just live it yourself, you've done the work, and that matters. Sarah hugged him, deeply grateful. Thank you for all of it, for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. Thank you for being brave enough to change. That night, Sarah sat in her organized, peaceful apartment and opened the book Marcus had given her. On the inside cover, he'd written a note. Sarah, Shitsuke is the bridge between who you were and who you're becoming. Walk it with patience, with compassion, with commitment, and know that the journey never ends. But that's not a burden. That's the gift. There's always room to grow. Keep shining. Marcus Sarah felt something settle in her chest. A quiet determination. A deep knowing. This wasn't a temporary fix. This wasn't a phase. This was who she was becoming. Someone who sorted what mattered and released what didn't. Someone who organized life with intention and care. Someone who maintained with attention and presence. Someone who standardized the good to make it sustainable. Someone who committed to the practice day after day, year after year, not perfectly, but persistently, not without struggle, but with purpose. She pulled out her own notebook, a practice she'd started 3 months ago, and wrote, Week 12, review what's working, morning routine, supply cart system, relationship maintenance, boundaries with mom. What needs adjustment? Still saying yes to too many extra shifts. Need a clearer standard. New commitment. Maximum 2 extra shifts per month. Non-negotiable. Improvement idea. Start a wins journal. Daily. Gratitude for progress, not just problems to fix. Who I'm becoming. Someone who honors herself enough to maintain her life with care. She closed the notebook and looked around her apartment, at the clean surfaces, the organized shelves, the intentional space. Then she looked at herself in the mirror across the room. The woman looking back wasn't the exhausted, overwhelmed person who'd stood in Marcus's hospital room 6 months ago. This woman was clear-eyed, grounded, present. This woman knew what mattered and had the courage to protect it. This woman was learning to sustain her transformation not through perfection, but through practice. Sarah smiled at her reflection. The journey was far from over. But she was no longer drowning. She was navigating. And with each day of practice, each choice to maintain, each commitment to the standard, she was becoming more fully herself. Shitsuke wasn't just about sustaining systems. It was about sustaining the self, the best, most authentic, most intentional version of who you could be. And that work? That was worth a lifetime. 6 months later, Sarah stood in front of a conference room at Boston General Hospital, looking at 23 faces staring back at her. Nurses, administrators, even 2 doctors, all here voluntarily on a Saturday morning to learn about the 5S principles. Her hands trembled slightly as she clicked to the first slide. Not from fear exactly, from the weight of responsibility. These people had given up their weekend time. They were trusting her to offer something valuable. Behind her nerves, though, was something solid. Confidence built not from theory, but from lived experience. She'd walked this path. She knew it worked, not because she'd read about it, but because she'd embodied it. "Good morning," Sarah began, her voice steadier than she felt. "A year ago, I was drowning. Standing in my apartment surrounded by clutter I couldn't clear, working shifts where I couldn't find supplies, living a life that felt like it was happening to me rather than being created by me. Anyone here relate?" Hands went up, nods around the room. One nurse, a woman Sarah didn't know, said quietly, "That's me right now." Sarah smiled gently. "Then you're in the right place. Because what I'm going to share with you isn't theory. It's not some productivity hack or life coach rhetoric. These are principles that actually work. That transformed my life from chaotic to clear, from reactive to intentional, from exhausted to energized." She clicked to the next slide, a photo of her old apartment, clothes everywhere, dishes stacked, clutter on every surface. "This was my home. This chaos was my normal." Click. Her apartment now, clean, organized, peaceful. This is what's possible when you commit to the practice. For the next 3 hours, Sarah walked them through each principle. But she didn't just lecture, she facilitated. She had them do a mental inventory exercise, listing everything in their lives that felt like clutter: physical, emotional, digital, relational. No judgment, just awareness. The room grew quiet as people wrote, some with tears in their eyes as they faced what they'd been carrying. She taught them Seiri by having them sort through their phone apps right there. Delete what wasn't serving them. The collective sound of apps being removed was oddly satisfying. She explained Seiton by having them reorganize their bags or backpacks using the principles. Most frequently used items, most accessible. Related items, grouped together. The energy in the room shifted from overwhelm to excitement as people discovered pockets they'd forgotten existed. For Seiso, she had them clean one small thing with complete attention: a phone screen, a pair of glasses, a notebook cover. "Notice how it feels," she said softly, "to care for something with genuine presence. That's what maintenance really is: sacred attention." Seiketsu came through helping them design one standardized routine. Just one. Morning, evening, work prep. Whatever they needed most. She had them share with a partner, refining and adjusting until it felt sustainable. And Shitsuke? That came at the end when she asked them to make one commitment. One non-negotiable practice they'd maintain for the next 30 days. Write it down. Share it with one person for accountability. "This isn't about perfection," Sarah said as they wrapped up. "It's about practice. B plus every day beats A plus once, and then burn out. Small, consistent, sustainable. That's how transformation becomes permanent. As people filed out, many stopped to thank her, to share their stories, to ask if she'd do another workshop. The woman who'd said, "That's me right now," approached last. "Thank you," she said, eyes red. "I needed this more than I knew. I've been pretending everything's fine while falling apart inside." Sarah squeezed her hand. "I know that feeling intimately, but you're not alone. And there's a way through. Just start with one drawer, one boundary, one choice at a time." After everyone left, Sarah sat alone in the empty conference room, exhausted but fulfilled. This was what Marcus had meant. Teaching multiplied the principles, shared them, spread the transformation. She pulled out her phone and texted him, "Just finished my first full workshop. 23 people. It was incredible and terrifying and perfect. Thank you for seeing this in me before I saw it myself." His response came quickly. "So proud of you. This is just the beginning. You're changing lives by sharing what changed yours. That's the ultimate Shitsuke, sustaining the practice by passing it forward." The nonprofit training program had been intensive. 6 months of learning facilitation, group dynamics, conflict resolution, advanced applications of the 5S methodology. Sarah had done it alongside her nursing shifts, exhausted but energized by the work. She'd learned that the principles applied everywhere. In schools, teachers were using them to manage classroom chaos. In businesses, teams were using them to streamline operations. In families, parents were using them to reduce daily stress. The universality was profound, because ultimately, the 5S principles weren't about organization. They were about intentionality, about choosing what mattered and protecting it, about creating environments, internal and external, that supported the life you actually wanted. Sarah had also learned that teaching was its own form of Shitsuke. Every time she explained the principles, she deepened her own understanding. Every time she helped someone apply them, she noticed new applications in her own life. Every time she witnessed transformation, she recommitted to her own practice. It was a beautiful cycle. Learn, apply, teach, deepen, repeat. One evening, 3 months after her first workshop, Sarah got a text from Jennifer. "Emergency. Can you come to the hospital? Not work-related, personal." Sarah's heart jumped. She drove to Boston General, finding Jennifer in the parking lot, sitting in her car, crying. "What happened?" Sarah asked, sliding into the passenger seat. "I relapsed," Jennifer said through tears. "Not drugs or anything, but the chaos. I stopped doing the routines, stopped maintaining. My apartment is a disaster again. My life is a disaster again. And I feel like such a failure because I know better now. I know what to do, and I still fell apart." Sarah's heart ached with recognition. She'd had her own relapses, days when she skipped her morning routine, weeks when she let her supply cart slide, moments when overwhelm crept back in. "You're not a failure," Sarah said firmly. "You're human. Shitsuke doesn't mean you never fall. It means you get back up. It means you don't use one bad day as an excuse to abandon the practice entirely." "But I should be better at this by now." Says who? This isn't a linear journey, Jen. It's a practice. Some days you'll nail it. Some days you won't. The goal isn't perfection, it's persistence. Just get back on track. Start again. One drawer at a time, remember? Jennifer wiped her eyes. How do you do it? How do you stay consistent? Sarah thought about that. Honestly, I don't. Not perfectly. But I've made the practice part of my identity. I'm someone who maintains order. So when I slip, and I do slip, it feels uncomfortable, like wearing dirty clothes. And that discomfort motivates me to realign, not from guilt, but from self-respect. I want that, Jennifer said quietly. I want it to feel natural instead of forced. Then keep practicing, and be gentle with yourself when you stumble. Shitsuke includes self-compassion. You can't sustain a practice built on shame. They sat together in the car as evening turned to night. Sarah helped Jennifer make a simple plan. Tonight, just make the bed. Tomorrow morning, just do 10 minutes of tidying. Small steps. Manageable. The opposite of the all-or-nothing thinking that had led to the relapse. And Jen, text me every morning this week. Just one sentence about what you did. Accountability without judgment. We'll get you back on track together. Jennifer hugged her tight. Thank you for not making me feel pathetic. You're not pathetic. You're in process. We all are. That interaction stayed with Sarah. It reminded her that transformation wasn't a destination. It was a direction. You didn't arrive at organized and then coast. You chose it again and again, day after day. Shitsuke was the practice of choosing. Sarah thought about her own journey. A year ago, she'd been lost. Now, she was facilitating workshops, mentoring colleagues, being invited to speak at healthcare conferences about sustainable practice. But she still had hard days. Days when she wanted to scroll instead of sleep. Days when she said yes when she meant no. Days when her apartment got messy or her boundaries got fuzzy. The difference was how she responded. Before, those moments would spiral into weeks of chaos. Now she noticed quickly and corrected course. Because the practice had given her tools. And more. Importantly, it had given her grace. She'd learned that discipline without self-compassion was just punishment. But discipline with self-compassion, that was sustainable. That was Shitsuke. On the 1-year anniversary of meeting Marcus, Sarah did something she'd been planning for months. She wrote an article for a nursing journal about the 5 S principles in healthcare. Not dry or academic, but personal, vulnerable, real. She wrote about standing in room 714, exhausted and lost. About Marcus seeing her when she couldn't see herself. About the journey from chaos to clarity. About teaching others and learning that transformation multiplied when shared. The article ended with this: the 5 S principles aren't magic. They're not easy. They require honesty, effort, and sustained commitment. But they work. Not because they're complex, but because they're true. Sort what matters from what doesn't. Organize what remains with intention. Maintain it with care and attention. Standardize the good to make it sustainable. And commit to the practice for life, knowing you'll stumble, but choosing to get back up. This is how chaos becomes clarity, how overwhelm becomes peace, how existing becomes living. One choice at a time, one day at a time, one practice at a time. And if a burned-out ER nurse drowning in clutter can transform her life, so can you. The question isn't whether you can, it's whether you will. The article was published 3 months later. Sarah received 47 emails from nurses around the country sharing their own stories, asking for guidance, expressing gratitude. The ripples kept spreading. 2 years after meeting Marcus, Sarah made a decision that would have terrified the old version of herself. She reduced her nursing hours to part-time and became a full-time facilitator for the Sustainable Practice Initiative. It meant less money, less security, more risk. But it also meant more alignment, more purpose, more impact. Her mother worried, "Are you sure? You work so hard to become a nurse." "I'm still a nurse, Mom. I'm just nursing in a different way, helping people heal from overwhelm instead of physical illness. Both matter." Her mother was quiet, then said, "You sound so sure of yourself, so clear. I'm proud of you, honey." Sarah's eyes welled up. "Thanks, Mom. That means everything." The work was challenging. Some workshops went beautifully, others flopped. Some people embraced the principles immediately, others resisted, clinging to their chaos because it was familiar. But Sarah learned that her job wasn't to force transformation. It was to offer it, to plant seeds, to model possibility, to hold space for people to discover their own readiness. And slowly, steadily, the impact grew. A hospital in Chicago adopted the 5S principles hospital-wide. Emergency response times improved by 18%. Staff satisfaction increased. Patient outcomes got better. A school district in Seattle trained all their teachers. Classroom management improved. Teacher burnout decreased. Students reported feeling calmer. A tech company in San Francisco implemented it for their teams. Productivity increased, but more importantly, people reported feeling more balanced, more human. The principles worked because they were true, simple but profound. Ancient wisdom applied to modern chaos. On a quiet Sunday morning, 3 years after her transformation began, Sarah sat in her apartment with her journal. She kept the practice of weekly review that Marcus had taught her, reflecting, adjusting, improving. She wrote, Week 156, Review, What's Working? Teaching schedule feels sustainable. Boundaries with work are strong. Morning routine is non-negotiable now, feels as natural as breathing. Relationship with Mom is deeper than ever. Friendships are fewer but richer. What needs adjustment? Still struggling with digital boundaries. Social media creeping back in. Need to recommit to time limits. New commitment. Phone stays in another room during morning routine. Non-negotiable. Gratitude for Marcus, who saw potential I didn't know I had. For the courage to change. For every person who's trusted me to facilitate their journey. For the practice that keeps teaching me who I'm becoming. Someone who lives intentionally, who chooses clarity over chaos, who knows that transformation isn't a destination but a direction, who sustains the practice not through perfection but through persistence. She closed the journal and looked around her apartment, still organized, still peaceful, but lived in, not sterile or perfect, just loved, maintained, honored. Sarah walked to a window and looked out at Boston waking up. The Charles River caught the morning light. People jogged along the paths. Life moved forward, constant and changing. She thought about the woman she'd been 3 years ago, drowning, lost, exhausted. If she could go back and tell that woman one thing, what would it be? You're not broken, you're just buried. And there's a way to dig yourself out, one choice at a time, one practice at a time. You're stronger than you know, braver than you think, and worthy of a life that feels intentional instead of chaotic. Start with one draw, one relationship, one boundary, one choice, and then do it again tomorrow. And the day after that, not perfectly, but persistently. That's all transformation requires. Not magic, just practice, just Shitsuke, just sustained commitment to becoming who you're meant to be. Sarah smiled, feeling gratitude wash over her, for Marcus, for the principals, for her own courage to do the work. Her phone buzzed, a text from a workshop participant. Day 90 of practicing the 5S principles. My life is unrecognizable. Thank you for teaching me that I deserve order and peace. Sarah's heart swelled. This was Shitsuke at its finest, not just sustaining her own practice, but helping others sustain theirs, creating a community of people choosing intentionality over chaos. She replied, "So proud of you. Keep going. The practice deepens the longer you commit. And remember, you're not just organizing your space, you're honoring your life. That's sacred work. Sacred work. Yes, that's exactly what it was." The 5S principles weren't about productivity or efficiency, though those were benefits. They were about something deeper, about respecting yourself enough to create a life that felt good from the inside out, about knowing what mattered and having the courage to protect it, about understanding that how you care for your space reflects how you care for your soul. Sarah had learned this truth through lived experience. Transformation isn't about changing everything at once. It's about choosing one thing consistently until it becomes who you are. Sort, organize, shine, standardize, sustain. 5 principles, 5 practices. One life transformed, and when that life was transformed, it transformed others. That was the ultimate gift of Shitsuke. It didn't just sustain you, it sustained everyone you touched. Sarah looked at the photo on her shelf, her and Marcus at her 6-month facilitator graduation, both smiling, both knowing they'd found something rare and valuable, not just principles, but a philosophy, a way of being. She whispered to the photo, "Thank you for seeing me, for teaching me, for believing the transformation was possible when I couldn't." Then she turned back to her day, to her practice, to her life, a life no longer defined by chaos but by choice, a life sustained not through willpower but through identity, a life lived with intention, maintained with care, and shared with generosity. This was the true power of the 5 Japanese rules for discipline. Not control, but clarity, not perfection, but practice, not someday, but today, and tomorrow, and every day after. One choice at a time, one practice at a time, one life transformed. And through that transformation, a world changed. Because discipline at its core isn't about restriction, it's about freedom. The freedom to live the life you were always meant to live. And that journey, that begins now.